gonna lie, a man locked me in his house and then gave me this massive library. I'd probably fall in love with him too. Belle, one of the most iconic Disney princesses, in my opinion. If you grew up as the girl who loved to read, always had your head in a book, she was your girl. You can't really go wrong, to be honest. Growing up, I always really liked Belle. I loved her character, film, it was my vibe. Also, really like Belle's dresses. She had some pretty good looks going on. 2017, obviously we had the live action, very controversial. Bit of a Marmite, I think you loved it or you hated it. Some of the costumes I really liked. Village dress, all of her looks kind of tied together. Yellow ball gown. It's a controversial topic. We'll steer clear of that, okay? But I also really like her animated dresses. Obviously they're a lot simpler. You know what? Why don't I recreate one? Broken up from uni, it's Christmas, I'm at home, I've got some time to kill, I've got about a million projects I should be doing right now. Am I gonna do any of them? I will, but not right now. Instead, what I'm gonna do is start a whole new project using all materials I've got. I want to recreate Belle's red winter dress. Not exactly, but pretty close. I don't want to buy anything new. Got some materials in mind, and I think I'm just gonna do it. Like, why not? Like, actually, why not? Who's stopping me? No one's here. I think I'm just gonna have fun with it. Let's make a winter Belle dress. Let's do it. Let's go. If you like this, maybe give it a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. Let's go. Fabric and design real quick before we start. Vibe of the dress is pretty simple. So I pulled some fabrics that I've got in my stash. I've got a plan. So I'm thinking for the main skirt, I've got this sort of plush, pinky, it was a curtain. I feel like that'll be okay. In her actual dress, she has ruffles on the bottom that are in a light pink. Sea light pink. 2 meters of this, so it's quite thick. In the design, the ruffles are directly attached to the skirt, but what I'm thinking is doing like a petticoat and then this being a separate overskirt. That's kind of the vibe I want to do a bit more. I love a costume with layers. I think that separate skirts, more effort but more fun. And then for the top is slightly darker, so I have this, I believe, some form of maybe like tablecloth. I think it's just gorgeous anyway. B, it's actually got little roses on it. Well, that's literally perfect. Obviously very important motif throughout the film. I love a detail, I love a little hidden thing, so I think that's going to be perfect. For the top, just this little offcut of stretchy stuff which I have. So let's do it. Okay, so starting off with the bodice, which is actually unusual for me because I normally start with the skirts. We've got a mock-up. Okay, so I started off by making a mock-up using my measurements and cutting out shapes that I knew I wanted to work with. There was lots of trial and error, pinning the pieces together, trying them on, taking them off until I was finally happy. I then used these pieces to essentially make my own pattern. I placed them on this gorgeous pinky red fabric and sketched around them in tailor's chalk. That meant I could start cutting them out, as you can see I'm doing here. The chalk lines are the pieces without seam allowance, so I'm adding about 2 to 2.5 centimeters around each edge that I'm cutting. I actually love this fabric so much. The colour is so gorgeous, and obviously it has little roses on it, which is a really nice detail. But it also cuts really nicely, which is just perfect. It might sound a bit weird, but genuinely, if you've ever worked with frustrating fabrics, those slippery satins or linings, the stretchy lycra, like, oh my word, just to have a fabric that is behaving nicely when you cut it is just, it's a bit of a novelty. It's really nice actually. So these are all the pieces cut out, and that means I can move on to actually joining them together. So the chalk lines are really helpful at this point because it means I know exactly where I want my pins to sit. So I pin down each edge with the pins parallel to the edge. I know that sounds weird because I'm saying a whole lot of the same words over again, but you know what I mean, you know what I'm trying to say. It looks something like this. Of course, with them pinned, I can then move on to actually sewing them together. Very simple, I'm just using a straight stitch on my machine to sew down the lines where all my pins are. I try to thread match as close as possible, but for some reason, all my threads have literally disappeared. Since being home from uni, I can't find anything. I don't know if someone's taken them or if maybe I didn't have as many as I thought I did. So it was fine, but also a bit of a pain. I will say I do always enjoy doing this part because it's just a simple job that you can just kind of chill and not concentrate. However, it does lead into the thing that I hate the absolute most, which is ironing my seams. A painful yet necessary job. And Elle, if you're watching this, which I know you are, iron your seams, Elle. There, you've been told. I'm joking, but seriously guys, press your seams, like, just do it. So here we have the bodice ironed flat. I did actually go in and iron my seams again, just because I felt they weren't pressed open enough on the front, but once that was done, I could then start sewing the boning channels. Initially, I was going to sew these into the lining, but I changed my mind and I wanted the bodice to lay a bit more smooth and just like make my life a bit easier. So I just felt it was better to sew them into the outer pieces. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. You can't really see them, especially from far away. So this is literally just more straight lines, which is easy peasy. The only place you have to be a bit careful is around the curves, so obviously where the bust is, you just want to make sure that your boning channels aren't wonky, your boning is going to fit, and just everything's laying smoothly and nice and flat. Okay, so I'm giving you an update of where we are so far. So on the bodice, oh, this is great actually because it's inside out, so you can't actually see. But this is what we're working with. We've got the bodice. This is obviously the inside. It's not going to look like that on me, just so you know. And then it's lined. Usually I like to do the lining in like the same colour, but I didn't really have any, so I was like, I'll just do white. And to be honest, it's fine, doesn't matter, you won't even see it. But yes, so we have, had the little pink strip down the front as well. This is actually going really well. Not to jinx it, touch wood, but it's actually going pretty good so far and quite quick. Like I literally just drafted the pattern last night and was like, bam, yeah, okay, done it now. I like the fit. I think it's cute. I really like the colour. I think this is quite fun because it's quite a spontaneous project that the other day I was like, oh, would love to make that. Now I'm just like, well, I'm making it. And usually what happens is like I have an idea for a project and then it takes ages before I actually get around to it. Sometimes it's nice to just not wait, to just do it, because then you don't lose that like excitement of like, oh my god, let's just make this. And it's chill, it's no pressure, it's just really fun. But anyway, the update was it's going well. We've almost got a bodice, but not yet. Still got a lot more to do, but it's good. Okay, so back to voiceover Lucy. With that done, the next thing I could do was add the pink detailing on the front. Pretty simple, it was just a strip of pink fabric. So then what I needed to do was attach the lining, since the outer bodice was basically done. So I started by pinning the lining to the outer bodice with the right sides facing. I sewed along the top, then trimmed the excess fabric and turned it inside out. I then top stitched the top of the bodice down just so it would sit nicely and lay flat. I sewed the final boning channels at the back of the bodice, which is where the eyelets will sit, and it should lace up just along my spine. I add boning always at the back because it means that under the pressure, the eyelets aren't going to sag and the bodice is gonna sit nicely, even with that pressure from lacing up. Okay, so next was on to making the bias. So you can just buy bias tape, but I wanted the bodice to be binded in the same satin fabric I used on the front and will also use for the petticoat. I cut strips of fabric and then ironed them in half, folding the raw edges inside so they're nice and hidden. I forgot to film that, so for visual reasons, just pretend that's what I'm ironing here and it's totally not the bodice and it's totally not the same clip you've seen before. I then pinned and stitched it down onto the bottom of the bodice. This often takes a little bit of adjusting, making sure that everything is nice and symmetrical, but it's worth it, it looks good in the end. Top stitch binding, but honestly I just prefer the look of a slip stitch since you can't really see it at all in the end. It is also quite nice because hand sewing is very chill, so we love. I will say though that obviously top stitching is way faster because you're doing it on a machine, so you can probably do it in like a minute, whereas this is going to take me 20 minutes or half an hour. But again, I just think it's worth it and I quite like this process, it's quite methodical, so this is what we're going with. Okay, so I then worked on adding the shoulder bit to the top of the bodice, which I did not film, so apologies about that, but it was literally just a strip of this like stretchy fabric I had an offcut of, like literally a rectangle, and then I just gathered it and stuck it on there, hope for the best. Okay, and then finally we can add the eyelets. So I'm going with gold because A, it complements like the red and the pinks. Also, it was the only colour I had, but I think they look really good, so I'm really happy about that. Adding eyelets was time consuming as ever, although it did go much quicker, I think because there were less layers of fabric. I always find it hilarious watching myself hammer eyelets because it's so aggressive and it looks so aggressive and it's just funny. But even though it's time consuming, it's all worth it. They look good in the end. And with that being said, here are the finished eyelets. Eyelets done means the bodice is finally finished, so here we go. Here is the finished bodice. I am so pleased with how this looks. It's actually quite simple, but to be honest, I think it looks really effective almost because of that. I love it. Also, I'm really pleased with the fit, and it is actually very comfy to wear, so I approve. I think Belle would approve too. The petticoat. Okay, so next we're moving on to the petticoat. So I'm using this pink satin type fabric, which is fairly heavyweight and has a nice luster to it. I started by cutting out the skirt pieces, of which there were 5. They are all trapezium shapes, which I will then sew together. I also measure, accounting for the fact that I want the top of the skirt to be gathered, so it's going to have to be larger than my waist measurements, about double, if not a little bit more. I then start sewing the sides of the skirt pieces together. I pinned them wrong sides facing, which seems counterintuitive, but that's because I'll be doing my absolute favourite French seams. I repeat this with each piece and then trim the excess fabric. Then I can turn them inside out and sew yet again. Obviously French seams, yes, are more time consuming, but they are so worth it every single time, since the seam is always so durable and the raw seams are enclosed nicely. Also, again, you're literally just straight stitching on the machine, so a pretty simple job, not something you have to worry about or think about too much, which is always nice. With the top of the skirt sorted, we can then move on to working on the ruffles. When I cut out the skirt pieces, I also cut out the ruffle pieces, which are basically just big long rectangles. I attach the rectangles together at the edge to create a really long rectangle. Before I can start gathering the fabric though, to create that ruff, I need to first hem it. I do a really simple rolled hem, basically just to ensure that the ruffles won't fray, especially because this fabric is a very frayy fabric. Yet again, this is quite time consuming but very much needed and totally worth it in the end. I then use the largest stitch length on my machine and straight stitch the top edge of the ruffle piece. Once I've done this, I can then gently pull at the threads, which will gather the fabric nicely. So lots and lots of large stitches are going to help me do this. The fabric does naturally gather somewhat at this point, but I will gather them more tightly later. So this is what the ruffles are looking like. With that done, we've, surprise surprise, got more sewing, but this time it's sewing the ruffles to the upper skirt pieces. I pinned them onto the bottom of the skirt pieces, right sides facing, and tried to space them out as evenly as possible before I begin to sew them. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it's good enough. Again, I'm just using a straight stitch to attach them, so it's very simple, although this time the stitch length is much smaller. I will be honest, halfway through this process my bobbin did run out, and slowly so did my will to live, but it was okay. I spent about 4 hours yapping to Elle while I was making this petticoat, so she got me through it, thank you Elle. But yeah, we're getting there. Slow progress, but we're getting there. With the ruffles attached, I turn my attention to the top of the skirt. Just as I did with the gathers at the bottom of the skirt, I use large stitches to then gather the top, not the bottom. It's all very confusing. I'm gathering the top of the skirt this time. I then pin the waistband, which is literally just a rectangle I've ironed in half, and sew that on top. I go slowly just so the fabric doesn't slip and I can keep everything under control, especially the stitching. Then, the last thing to do is to stitch the inside of the waistband down. Again, I'm using a slip stitch just because it's nice and neat and you can't really see it. I also, at this point, sew down clasp, which is what makes the skirt actually wearable, which, you know, is an ideal function of the skirt. And with that, we have the finished petticoat. At first I felt like the ruffles were a bit too short, but I actually ended up thinking they were pretty perfect for this dress. So, a reminder for when you're doubting yourself, it usually works out okay in the end. Trust the process and trust yourself, you'll get where you need to go. The overskirt. Okay, so next is moving on to the overskirt. So this will sit, as the name implies, over the petticoat and under the bodice, hence overskirt. I actually had the perfect fabric for this, which is, surprise surprise, an old curtain. It's a really nice weight and it's also a plush sort of fabric. Just like the petticoat, I cut out trapezium shapes, although this time there's only 4, not 5, since the front essentially stays open, so it's like we're skipping out a panel. Yet again, I plan on gathering the top, so the measurements are slightly larger in width than my own waist measurements. I was actually quite nervous to cut this fabric because obviously I can't get more, so if I mess it up, for lack of a better word, I'm screwed. Luckily, I did the maths and the measuring right, so we were all good. I then begin sewing up the sides together. I do this with right sides facing as I'm not French seaming this fabric. In fact, I'm doing something I never usually do, and I'm actually just doing a basic straight seam. Since this fabric has a backing on it, and it isn't woven, it doesn't fray, which is perfect because I can just iron my seams flat and I don't have to worry about reinforcing them and concealing a raw edge, which is why I usually do a French seam. I then, of course, pressed my seams open, which, yes, again, I forgot to film, so pretend that's what I'm doing here, I'm just giving you a visual. I do think I was still talking to Elle at this time, so you've got her to blame for that since we were yapping. But with the seams pressed open, I started gathering the top, the same way I have done previously, just using a large stitch length and then gently pulling it by hand, and there you go, some lovely gathers. Yet again, I need to attach the waistband, which is just another long rectangle. I pin it to the top and sew it down again, making sure to go slowly, so like I said, I have control of the gathers and the placement. Then, again, I'm slip stitching the waistband on the inside just so it's nice and neat. Since the fabric is slightly plush, the stitches sort of disappear into the fabric, which is quite fun, and makes for some good hidden stitching, which of course we love. I also sew on some clasps, so again, the skirt is actually functional, although this time the clasps sit at the front as opposed to the back. I always like the waistband to be a little bit longer, so I can change the placement of the clasp if I need. So here we have the two skirts finished and being worn together. I really like how they look, especially together, and I think that the lengths ended up being pretty perfect, and I'm just happy with where everything's sitting. Also, that twirl action, you know it's good when you got a good spin. Now the last thing to do is make the sleeves. Now, confession time. I didn't really film this part. I know, my bad, I apologise, but I'll talk you through it regardless. So I cut out oval shapes in the light pink fabric, which is the stretchy one. I gathered the top so it was slightly ruffled, and that part just sits above the elbow and over the forearm. I then used rectangle shapes for the upper sleeve parts. I stitched both of these pieces together. I then added boning on the edge so that when I added eyelets, the fabric would sit taut and not sag under the pressure. I then, of course, added eyelets, although disaster, I was 2 eyelets short. Very upsetting, but it's okay, I've ordered more, and as of filming this, we are in fact still missing 2 eyelets on one sleeve, but that will be remedied very shortly. I do apologise, it is quite hard to explain what I'm talking about, but what I'm trying to say is they were actually very simple. They were not that difficult to make. It was a rectangle and an oval that was gathered, put together, slapped in some eyelets. There you go. Hey presto, you got sleeves. But with that said, the sleeves have been sewn and the outfit is complete, so without further ado, let me stop yapping and show you that this is the final dress. So here we are, 2 days later, the completed winter belle dress. So I can't believe I'm saying that 2 days, that's insane. I don't know. Okay, so I'm so happy with how this turned out, as you can probably tell. This project, super quick, super simple. Honestly, just being back from uni, I wanted something just fun that I could just really sink my teeth into and just like go for it. This project, obviously it doesn't have any embroidery or beading. That made it so much quicker. There were 2 full days of sewing, literally all day, but here we are. I'm so happy with this. The fit, it feels amazing. I think it looks amazing as well. I'm just really happy overall. I think it turned out great, and it was nice to be able to use up some fabric that I had in my stash. It doesn't help my hoarding tendencies, but I'm really happy with it. I hope you like it. I definitely need to make more belle dresses in the future. Definitely her green library dress, definitely her yellow ball gown. Let me know what you think I should make. I hope you have a wonderful Merry Christmas if you celebrate, and a Happy New Year. Be kind to yourself. This is always a difficult time of the year for a myriad of different reasons, but when winter leaves, spring will come. So for now, I hope you have a wonderful winter, and I'll see you next year. If you like this video, maybe give it a like. If you want to see more, stick around, subscribe. I'll be making plenty more dresses. Just you wait, and keep sewing.